So, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us on this July Tennessee Turf Tuesday for this year. This July edition is titled Managing Warm Season Sports Turf in a Changing Environment. I'd like to start off introducing all the panelists. I'm Tyler Carr. I'm a PhD student in Dr. Sorochan's Sports Turf Research Group at the University of Tennessee. And my research involves zoysiagrass for sports turf and golf courses. We also are joined with Dr. John Sorochan. We also have Taylor Williams. He's a technician with Dr. Sorochan. We have Dr. Kyley Dickson. He's another technician in Dr. Sorochan's lab. And we also have a special guest joining us from Singapore, Jonathan Teo. He is the Deputy Director, Pitch Operations at Singapore Sports Hub. So it's very late for Jonathan where he's at, almost midnight. So hopefully you guys enjoy having Jonathan's perspective on growing both Bermuda grass and Zoysia grass in a challenging environment. So a lot of you are on this webinar wanting pesticide credits. First off, this webinar is being recorded, and we place these recorded sessions on our YouTube channel, and that's at UT Turfgrass. However, these pesticide credits are available for live viewing only, not archive views. So if you're watching this archived, you cannot get pesticide credits. And as many of you saw on registration, you provided all the information we need for pesticide credits. And to earn these pesticide credits, you need to stay for the duration of the webinar. Zoom knows when you logged on and when you log off, and we can send that information easily off to the respective states for pesticide credits. The exception is New Jersey. If we have anyone from New Jersey on here, we need a time-stamped photo of your identification, each at the beginning and at the end of the webinar. And if you could email that to Dr. Jim Brosnan, and I will include his email address in the chat. So you can send your two timestamp photos to his email. Another thing before we get started is fielding questions. Now, this is going to be a roundtable discussion format, so we encourage as many questions as you guys can give us. And to best facilitate that, let's use the Q&A box instead of the chat function. That allows us to effectively thread questions and answers, and we'll try to get to as many of those verbally as we can. And but we may answer some of those back through the chat or through the Q&A box. And so with that, let's get started. And with this being a talking about challenging environments for sports turf, I think we should start off talking about what some of these challenges are. You know, the whole last year, we didn't have a field day, and much of that was due to the pandemic. And I know many of you have had challenges with the pandemic as well. And even if even moving forward without the pandemic, there will be challenges with increased play on your fields, difficulties getting equipment, and then from the higher end stadiums, they want to throw more events on there. And we need to be able to have grasses that can withstand these events, withstand play, while also making it where we can have an effective operating budget. So, Dr. Sorochan, you want to take over, discuss some of what you've heard from people about some of the challenges that they're facing?
Yeah, definitely. And, it's what's been crazy, though, is it's, within, especially in the United States, it was different from one state to another. A lot of states like Michigan shut down completely last year from the pandemic, and people weren't allowed out to play golf or even sports and things like that for a long time. Whereas a state like Tennessee, golf courses and sports fields were still open And, you know, while some of the club sports were reduced, when they did get out, they were out in droves. And that was one way to social distance, was outside on golf courses and sports fields. But sports fields took a lot of abuse. And at the same time, while they're getting abused, there's limited inputs going into them. And what we're finding is the supply chain of getting resources and purse strings being, people holding back on money were a lot of challenges that I'd witnessed from last year and going into this year. If you want to buy a new mower, whether it's, you know, Toro, John Deere, or Jacobson, it might be 6 to 8 months before you can even get it delivered now. It's just because of a supply chain, getting the materials for those companies to build their equipment. So it's not just budgets, but it's just the whole ripple effect of what's going on is making more and more challenges on sports fields.
And they're also unaware of, you know, what comes next. The revenue streams are less.
Exactly.
And
I think that's why a lot of people were cautious on what they said, you know. You know, Jonathan, I know you have, you know, multiple events in your stadium every year, and last year you haven't had any, and I think we're hoping you're going to have a rugby 15s in October. Is that correct?
Yeah, a rugby 7s in October.
Rugby 7.
Yeah.
But how many events do you typically have in a season in your stadium? On grass, non-concerts?
Maybe about 28 to 30. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
28 to 30. So, you know, that's a lot of lost revenue that goes into.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, typically
how to budget?
Typically in a year with concerts and all that, we get about 52.
52 events.
Yeah.
So, you know, those concerts help drive your budget too, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Jonathan's in a unique situation at Singapore, where his stadium is kind of like, for the States, I would compare it to Seattle's stadium. Is that CenturyLink, where has a lot of shade over the spectators, but he's growing grass there. They have artificial at CenturyLink. Right. But Jonathan started with perennial ryegrass, right, at this stadium. Then has gone to Bermuda grass, and then you're on your second different type of Zoysia grass currently.
Yeah, currently on Zoysia Zion.
So Jonathan, can you talk a bit about that transition from ryegrass to Bermuda grass to Zoysia grass, and some of the things that drove those decisions?
I think initially, because of the shade, we thought that the ryegrass would help because of the lack of sunlight and all that. And when we have a roof over our dome, you can keep things really pretty cool. But the recovery was not as quick as we wanted. The calendar events was really robust, and there was a lot of changing of events from sporting events to concerts and all that. So a turf contractor was brought in, and they introduced a hybrid system with Bermuda grass. It's on the extra grass lay and play. However, we do notice that in 3 years of the operation, it's quite costly. It's more challenging to maintain, just because Bermuda requires more light. Hence, we had growth lights that didn't help us to save costs. Neither did the recovery meet our expectations. So we went down the line looking at the local Japonica variety first. It stood very well. It held the traffic very well, but it wasn't as I would say much of a presentation. So we look at Zion, and we discovered that Zion was more durable. Hence, we are now we are stuck with Zion, and I have got 3 nurseries to help me with my operation. And typically, I bring in grass in and out of the stadium whenever we have a sporting event.
It's been really unique, because I've been able to be involved with you, Jonathan, since 2016, And,
Right.
you know, there's a great picture right there showing the installation of I believe this is the Japonica, and you can see you know, your transition from HPS lights to, you got some LED lights in the corners, where going from Bermuda grass to Zoysia grass, you don't need the grow lights as much.
No.
But
no.
you also having that lay in play, because like you said, you have 52 events a year, and they're not all sporting events. So instead of playing on grass and trying to keep grass alive in a challenging environment like our topic is today, you can take it outside to a nursery and let it grow like you're doing. And it's been a whole thing of trial and error of learning, and how these Zoysia matrellas, the Xeon, do better than the Japonica types in the stadium for one, wear tolerance and
Yep.
and for shade tolerance.
Correct.
It's been
That's what we observe.
It's been a neat process. And as you mentioned, the hybrid, using the hybrid system where you had the artificial carpeted system with the Bermuda grass on it. You know, every time when I was there witnessing, when they grow it in the nursery, they go harvest the sod, but when you cut that artificial turf, you don't get a sharp edge in those hybrid systems. So when you go to knit it in the stadium, it was never very clean. It was always a challenge, wasn't it, to do that?
Yes. The carpet prevent us to have a very nice, clean, seamless kind of effect. Even after 10 days, you still can see the lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Singapore being how many uses did you get out of one carpeted system too, before you had to rebuild a whole new nursery field?
I think maximum I can do 4 rotation, meaning
4
in and out. So that's 8 times.
Right.
Yeah.
And land is precious, especially landfills. So to dispose of a hybrid system in Singapore, you know, it's not easy.
I have to pay for it to dispose.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things when we look at the below ground biomass of these zoysias, particularly these matrella types, it adds such a strong base that you could harvest, take it out, put it in the stadium, take it back out, put it in your nursery, and in perpetuity, you can almost have a renewable field it's ready to go, right?
Very correct. That's exactly how we approach it. And it's also a business, you know, cost is a main factor.
Mm-hmm.
Buying the carpet each year, you know, we have to look at putting budget of easily $250,000 just to buy the carpet.
Yeah.
So cost is another driving factor.
Right. And cost is always going to be the driving factor. And you've been a great example, what I've seen over the years of really saving your organizations, your companies, the sports hubs, a lot of money over years with what you've transitioned to from the past. And it's been fantastic.
I've actually saved more than 55%
of your budget,
entire operation. Yeah, of the budget. Yeah.
That's outstanding.
It costs a lot.
Yeah. That's pretty good. Hopefully they gave you that in a raise, right?
No, just more work.
Yeah. But, you know, I guess staying on some of the you know, there's so much to talk about in the warm season grasses. You know, and Kyley, I know we're getting into doing a lot of traction on these, and and Tyler and Taylor, we're just starting to learn, you know, how do these zoysia grasses compared to Bermuda grasses, and what is the traction, the playability for sports? You know, it's not like it's a brand new thing. There's been zoysia grass used for soccer and for baseball and things like that. But what about, you know, for rugby 15s or rugby 7s and in NFL type football? Do you guys, anyone think that these are doable and comparable to the Bermudas?
I mean,
So I'll speak at once.
Just from some of our preliminary work, some of these zoysia grass that we've tested have had the traffic tolerance of at least Tifway,
Mm-hmm.
standard. And let me pull up a picture showing. Let's see, is this?
And this is hot off the press, isn't it?
Hot off the press.
Literally, this is.
We
This is
started,
as of last week, right?
yes, we started a trial 3 weeks ago. It's in week 4 currently, comparing 3 different types of zoysia grass for sports fields to Tifway, which is, like I said, the standard, and compared them for traffic tolerance. And we're trying to beat them up as much as we can. We're putting 8 games on them per week, um, to really simulate a worst case scenario. I don't know many places that would get 8 games per week, but we want to beat them up and just see how well they fare.
Well, and I think you could see some places right now where there's like soccer camps going on or facilities that they're using these fields during the week, sun up to sundown, with kids playing on them or whatever. It might not be this level of intensity because this is NFL type heavy traffic down the middle, or college football type traffic, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really heavy traffic, but you're literally abusing these things, simulating 8 games a week. That's a lot.
And so,
For sure.
correct me if I'm wrong, that is a 315 pound. Our one game is 40-yard line to 40-yard line in between the hash marks. And is that simulating a 315 pound?
And Kyley might be able to chime in. I think it's about a 300-pound athlete. We simulate the forces with our trafficker, with the
Yeah, it's a 300-pound athlete. So we're trying, like, what that. So this again is like not like they're saying, it's not indicative of the whole field, but the worst spot. So it's really nice with this is to be able to have the same root. These all have the same root zone. So it's a really easy comparison between them when Tyler's trafficking these. We're really getting to see like the only real difference we've got between these plots is the grass. So the root zone's the same. They're getting this. They have the same irrigation, same amount of light. And obviously these aren't in shady condition. This is just open light we have. But just when you do these traffic events, like this is great to see. For years, like 419 was the only thing that has been the gold standard. And so there was always trouble getting Bermuda grass to be close to this. Well, now there's some other Bermuda grasses that are doing pretty well. Like there's some Tahoma, there's Tiff Tuff, there's Northbridge, there's Latitude that can do just as good and not better than 419. And now being able to see something like Stadium Zoysiagrass that it's getting very close to the 419, or it's right at it. Probably statistically at this point, it's almost the same, at least through 16 games. So you're getting to where we got some Bermuda grasses that are getting better. Now we're getting some Zoysia grasses that are getting up there, and the stadium looks like it could be really good as far as like to handle the traffic tolerance in addition to the benefits you're getting from the different shade and those type of things. But it's really exciting to see. And then obviously the more we would expect to see more cover, you're going to have more traction. You're going to have better footing because as it starts to get brown is what we're looking at, these like some of the Xeon and the 54-9. Some of those spots, when you're going to have less grass, there's going to be less for the cleat to engage in the surface in. So we haven't tested this yet, but I would expect there to be less traction at those spots because they have less grass to interact with to a certain point. So it's very exciting to see that we're finally getting some Zoysias that are very close to 419, and we're getting something that just could be a great option for players to withstand high traffic amounts, which has been kind of the problem with some of this. And then the other interesting thing Tyler's going to be looking at this is how are they going to recover? That's once this study is over, can these bounce back really good? But the fact that Stadium has held green cover this long is the longest I've ever seen Zoysia grass hold this kind of green cover this late into a traffic test. And especially, we've never gone this high. We wanted to really, he's got some different rates, but this one is the highest rate we've ever put out at one time. And it's really handling it well, which is very encouraging to see.
And it's even after 24 games and really from 16 to 24, Stadium is performing much better than what has been considered the standard for Zoysia matrellas and Xeon. And people may argue that, but for this trial, our standard for this would be Xeon. 54-9 is actually a Japonica,
an experimental japonica that was meant to be aggressive, right?
Yes, and it seems to be performing similarly to Xeon, but it's really good to see that Stadium, another Zoysia matrella, is really performing better than Xeon. And Jonathan's had a ton of success with Xeon, and Stadium he may even have greater success. And it has that darker green color that you would really see with Bermuda grass. Xeon has a little bit lighter color, and so that may be more attractive for people as well.
And then what's really good to note on this is, as Kyley had mentioned, this is in full sun. So this is under outdoor conditions, normal that you might see at a park or some area like that on a sand-based root zone. But you put this in a shaded stadium, and we all know, as my students, I've always learned in my class, Bermuda grass will come in 4th place in a 3-horse race when it comes to shade tolerance. It's our single worst shade tolerant grass we've got, Bermuda grass. These Matrella zoysias with their enhanced shade tolerance, all of a sudden you put this study in a partial light stadium or reduced light stadium, or just in a climate like Singapore, whether your stadium is a lot of shade, you just have a lot of humidity and cloudy, low light days. That's why those grasses, the zoysias, evolved in Southeast Asia, because the DLI just isn't very high. Yep. So, looking at a changing environment or different things and budget constraints, everything is equal, but Tyler, are you fertilizing these the same? Because the requirements for zoysias are a lot less for nitrogen, right?
Right. They're being fertilized differently. The Bermuda grass is receiving a pound of nitrogen per month during the growing season, and that's just from urea in applications every 2 weeks, so half a pound every 2 weeks. The Zoysia grass is receiving half of that. So a quarter pound of N is going out every 2 weeks. And from a mowing standpoint, we're mowing these 3 times a week, and that's really just for the Bermuda grass. They're all in a randomized treatment structure. So, but the Zoysia grass is not getting cut very often. You could probably mow this the stadium Zoysia grass 2 times a week.
Maybe once a week.
Yeah, maybe once a week. And compared to Xeon, it grows a lot less.
Right, and that's being mowed at 3/4 of an inch or 19 millimeters. That's that low of a height. You think the more lower that height, you need to mow more frequently. But if it's just not growing vertically, it's growing more laterally. That's telling, and this is where one project will spawn 10 different other projects. We need to look at these under low light. What about with the plant growth regulator even? Because that increases the density of these grasses, and especially in shade, we know it improves the wear tolerance of all grasses, Bermuda grass, Zoysia grass, cool season grasses. Plant growth regulators help them in shade and improve their wear tolerance in shade. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, I guess, as we kind of look at it with these grasses being potential for a changing climate, changing environment.
And I did want to point out, Kyley mentioned this, we had different rates of this. So we put 8 games out per week. In this, we put out 4 games per week. And after 12 games, of 3 weeks, this would be a simulation for like a football practice field. If you put this in your stadium, you're going to want to put the same field on your practice field. And Stadium and Tifway are neck and neck, and then Xeon's lagging a little bit behind. So this would be pretty typical for for a high-end practice field.
So, Tyler, would you say that you think the stadium and the 419 look very similar, like the plots with like side by side?
Yes, and
as far as appearance, texture, like that type of thing. If you were to walk up on it, because some of the zoysia grasses, they have like a very wide leaf texture, and some of them have a very thin. But the stadium seems really close to 419 when they're side by side. At least, is that what you think?
Yeah, every time I talk to people about this grass, I tell them, from afar you would think it's Bermuda grass because it has that dark green, almost bluish color in some instances, like Bermuda grass does when it's well fertilized. It's and in shade it would likely perform better than Bermuda grass.
So when you're looking at these, I mean, this is again like 12 games is quite a fit. Even though it's a lower rate than the other ones, they're still holding very close, and the Tifway is holding extremely close to Stadium, and then it's very encouraging to see how long, at least even through 8 games, at a reduced rate. Now, some fields aren't going to get this much traffic, and we know that. Again, we're just trying to simulate the worst case scenarios with what is a high use going to see, because we know if we're stimulating the high end, then everything below that should be much better than this. So we're just trying to create worst case scenarios, and 87% through 12 games for those at a lower rate. That's really good. And you can also see that if you're not playing as many games on these, they still last fairly good. But we're talking, what was it, 70% through 24 games versus 87% at the lower rate. So for Xeon or for Stadium, so we're doing pretty well there. It's just looking at the differences there. So it's really the grass is really holding up to some of this traffic very well and through a lot of traffic very quickly. Sometimes we'll do much lower games over time and it'll really drop off, but the Stadium and 419 are just so close. This is a very exciting finding from these studies that these, again, we're not completely done. This study isn't done. We're still going on with it. But at this point in the study, this is very exciting to see kind of just where we're at.
Yeah. And we just had a question come in from Ryan asking if Stadium's a Blade Runner product and how does it compare to laser? Definitely, it's a Blade Runner product. It's out of Blade Runner Sod Farms out of Texas. I believe there's several golf courses actually putting them in some fairways, or a few golf courses starting to put them in. And laser is a hybrid zoysia grass, which it's a hybrid of Zoysia matrella and Zoysia minima, and it's meant for putting greens. It's a putting green height grass, whereas Stadium would be more of you wouldn't want to take it down to 1/10 of an inch or lower like that. It'd be more meant for a fairway or sports field height grass.
And I know Blade Runner is currently looking at laser as a tee box surrounds type grass as well. So in the future, we may, depending on how laser comes out, we may see laser in some of those areas of the sports field.
And we'll talk a lot about laser next month in August, Zoysia grass putting green, Tennessee Turf Tuesday, right?
Yes.
So Tyler, do you want to maybe, I'm sure a question some of the people will have on this as well. That's great. What is the growing time if I were to try to transition through maybe a Stadium Zoysia? Would you recommend sprigging or sodding, or what would be the way you recommend to install it in a field if you were to remove something or you were putting something in? Would you go with try to get a sod, or would you try to sprig from your research at this point?
It depends. Most of it depends on budget and how much time you have. Sod is going to cost probably 3 or 4 times more than sprigs, but you're going to be able to play on it in probably 2 weeks or so. The sprigs, what the general consensus is for these, you're going to have to sprig Zoysia grass at a higher rate than Bermuda grass. The putting greens we're sprigging anywhere from, the practitioners are putting out anywhere from 1,800 to 12,000 bushels per acre. With some of these sports turf type matrellas that may be a little more aggressive from a lateral growing standpoint, you may be able to get away with lower sprigging rates, but we haven't really tested that. But you're probably looking at from planting to being able to play on sprigs, I would say probably in the 3 to 4 month range, which is a lot less. It's a lot more time than Bermuda grass. So it just depends on that break even point, I guess I would say, for if you're trying to get revenue at a facility, how much time you're willing to lose, or time you're willing to spend from revenue lost. It's slower than Bermuda grass, but I would recommend sodding if you have the money and need it down fast.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into the line of what would be interesting to see some of the recovery of these too. And I think and my hypothesis is maybe some of these matrellas that have more below ground biomass will come up from below, whereas the japonica that's being worn is going to have to fill in by stolons more. And it's just going to be interesting over the next few months to see how these start to recover, because as your plots get down to 50%, that's where your cutoff is, and then you're going to start using growing degree days to map the recovery to get back to 90%, right?
Right, and that's the big question we have with zoysia grass from a recovery standpoint. There's been some research done on divots with zoysia grass and Bermuda grass, and kind of showed that zoysia grass was more resistant to divots, um, but it took longer to recover. So if we beat them down to 50% coverage, how long does it take for them to recover? Do we need to give these fields a week of a break during the summer just to have recovery? We don't know. That's a big question we need to answer, and that will really help give us a more well-rounded understanding of these grasses. And this is also going to be repeated next year too. So we'll get two different growing seasons to check this out.
And Jonathan, you've had rugby 15s played on Xeon. So how is it beaten up, and then how did it recover when you've taken it back to the nursery? How do you find that it performs for you?
I think in terms of performance, it performed very well. There's no chance of losing their footing when they do a scrum, and it still remains intact when we harvest it out from the stadium and back to the nursery. I think if we were to look at recovery, and because I have 3 pitches to rotate, I think 3 months easy. I can recover it back full. Yeah.
Okay.
But that is a totally complete worn out surface by the time rugby is done, because of the logos. They paint it on it, you'll be all right down. So we take it back to the nursery, we phrase most everything to get it even, and then we regrow it back. So it's generally like a brand new start.
Right. You just a complete new pitch almost, just raising it down. That's interesting.
So we have a question from Ryan about overseeding, overseeding zoysia grass, and that is something that I've had questions about. The general consensus is that zoysia grass, it's difficult to overseed into, and it's something I'm interested in looking at. And the zoysia grass does hold on to color a little bit longer than Bermuda grass. It greens up earlier, and so if you're willing to accept some dormancy, that's an option for you. But there needs to be some work done on seeing if we can overseed into these zoysias. They're so dense, kind of like the newer Bermuda grass cultivars. They're really dense, and it's hard to work seed into. This is going to be more difficult, and there may be more cultural practices we have to do to really get good seed to soil contact. Have any of you seen successful zoysia grass overseedings?
It's been a very big challenge. From everything I've seen, and that's why we see a lot less, like even on a golf course fairway, a zoysia grass versus a Bermuda grass fairway, you get just way less winter annual weeds on zoysia grass, just because it's so hard for those even weed seeds to germinate and grow in it. So that there definitely would need to be work in it. But one of the reasons why we wanted to look at these zoysia grasses in the transition zone where we are is say, like, you look at, like, Nashville has an MLS team, and or Cincinnati, but they've got Ryegrass up in Cincinnati. But Nashville, they built a new stadium. If they had overseeded Bermuda grass to start their season in March, you always have that ugliness of transition when the ryegrass goes to the Bermuda grass, and there's going to be a 2 or 3 week period at least where it looks really bad. And where do you time that? In a let's say an MLS soccer stadium in the spring, like April, May, when you want to or May, early June, when you want to transition that, when you have games being played and it's on TV, and then you go into the fall and your season's getting in, then it's done by the end of October or something. Well, do you really need to overseed? And if you do overseed, because you want it green in spring, you have that transition. And so one of the reasons what we've seen in the zoysia, even the Xeon and the stadium, is they're pretty green in March. And if you had covers on them, and a lot of these stadiums might have heating systems, you could actually get it to green up and be green in March. and get through at least let's say a soccer season, a growing season of warm season grasses. Now for something like the Tennessee Titans or something, the NFL, that becomes a whole other story, is how do you get it to, overseed for the fall? And then what is it like when it becomes cooler temperatures, when there's no recovery, just like Bermuda grass? So we got good wear tolerance out of these, but you're not going to get any recovery from them. So, there's lots of things that we still need to look at with these grasses being that new, for sure, I think.
Yeah, talking about overseeding, we had a grad student that finished up, Matt Lane. He was looking at overseeding some of those new Bermuda grass varieties. What if you overseeded into them? And we had Tiff Tuff, we have Northridge, and we had Tahoma 31. And so we were looking at that, and we were able to get those to overseed pretty well, because they were from the previous NTEP. The Bermuda grass NTEP with traffic, that was one of the top performers, or those are the top performers. So we wanted to kind of do some more research, kind of see what they were looking like. And when we did that, they all handled overseeding pretty well here with our research, like with the trials that we did. I'm looking at different combinations. If you could you cover them? How would they compare to that versus overseeding versus painting? And it really seemed that some of the best treatments we had as far as weed pressure and those type of things were the overseeding plots with some of the stuff, the results he found out. And it could be that these grasses are very thick, and they kind of help shade out a lot of weeds and some of those other issues. But it was quite a bit. They did pretty well, and they were handling the overseeding well, and you could use that. And then trafficking too. They handled they were the best traffic tolerant varieties at the time, so they've been doing very well, and they continue to really just thrive and do very well at least in this environment. But once you get into shade, maybe a different story. But at this point, just to use them for traffic tolerance and those type of things, we've found really good results, at least here at UT.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about zoysia today, but those varieties right now, Tyler and Taylor, that we're trafficking right now, the Tahoma 31, the Northbridge, and the Tiff Tuff are all doing exceptional.
Yeah.
Obviously we're right in the prime of Bermuda grass growing weather and things, but these two of these varieties have exceptional cold tolerance, and the new varieties, the new grasses that are out are really making it a lot better for sports fields. It took 50, 60, 70 years almost to get some Bermuda grasses that are better than Tiffway for wear tolerance, and I think we've got some of them, and they also have improved cold tolerances too.
Yeah, I was going to make a figure or a picture that showed the different Bermuda grasses, Tiff Tuff, Northbridge, and Tahoma at the different games, but they're all above 90%, even at 24 games. I mean, they're handling the traffic tremendously.
Yeah, under ideal conditions, Bermuda grass is still an outstanding grass for sure. Higher inputs for more mowing. You're going to need at 3/4 of an inch or 19 millimeters. During the summer you'll need to mow those 3 times a week, or use a plant growth regulator, because you'll start seeing scalping if you go twice a week at those heights, because they just grow so prolifically, for sure.
And yeah, David, you raised your hand. If you have a question, can you please add that in the Q&A box? I just saw you raise your hand twice on here. I just want you to be able to have your question answered.
Yeah, and so as we've been doing that with those traffic ones, so if you're looking at they're above 90 at 24 at those games. So we've had really good, and those are just excellent. And we've had trouble beating some of these grasses up just enough to really kind of get them going. So that way we can get them down to those, to really tear them up, because they're just so aggressive growing. They continually they just hard to beat up. They've been very good. But as far as maintenance or anything, Taylor, do you think that we've had to sharpen the mower anymore? You think it's all been about the same? Like, they've handled it pretty well, and we've not had huge scalping issues or anything at this point?
No, I think overall they're pretty comparable to Bermuda grass as far as wear and tear on mowers go. I mean, I can't tell of any differences or the way that they cut. I mean, they're all pretty similar to Bermuda grass.
Did notice some seed heads popping on the a lot more on the Tiff Tuff was had a lot of seed heads popping up just in the last few weeks ago for about a 2-week spurt. Just that time of year, even at that low height of cut, whereas the other grasses didn't seem to go to seed as much.
Yeah, and there is a little bit of difference in color between some of those. When you're looking at the differences in the Tiff Tuff, the Northbridge, and the Tahoma, there are some a little bit of visual differences, and they're okay. But but it's just not quite been just great. And enough to just been a huge differences in that. And then also the we last year we did some traction measurements on it, and we mowed them at a 1/2 inch and 3/4 of an inch, and we were getting pretty similar results as far as that. We weren't getting a huge breakout in between the varieties. They were so close. They're all very dense and have the same root zone that we tested that on. So we were doing different traction measurements, and they were all, so I couldn't get a breakout there as far as the different varieties go. Just they're so close in that, just kind of like what Tyler's seeing now with the traffic tolerance. They're all so close. There may be like you could be splitting some hairs, but practically in the real world, would it make a whole lot of difference? It may not. It may be more. Are you looking for cold tolerance? Are you looking for what are you looking for in that aspect with that grass and what you're trying to do with it?
Yeah.
And then like if you're getting to shade with what Jonathan's dealing with, maybe if you had a grass that's similar to 419, but you're going to have much improved shade tolerance, that's just like the best of both worlds there. So that's just a lot of things to consider as you're trying to select what grass, or you're using your grasses. What is the benefit? And then again, the Zoysias have much less inputs as far as the fertility goes to try to do that. With disease, have you seen a whole lot of disease, Jonathan, with the Zoysia grass you've had, or have it been pretty good luck with that?
No disease at all. Yeah, especially with the Zion. I mean, the Bermuda I could keep inside the stadium dome for 2.5 to 3 months max. I've been able to stretch my Zion to 4.5 months in the stadium.
Okay.
Yeah, and within games, I can see recovery in 7 to 10 days. Yeah. So it's just amazing transitioning from Bermuda grass to this Zion.
So when you're trying to get recovery with the Xeon, is there anything you can do to push it? You just try to keep everything off of it and let the sun go, or is there like something you do that kind of helps that, or is it natural for it?
It's natural. Actually, by doing all these things, we are putting some sort of stress on it. So we just let it be.
Yeah.
And it works.
Yeah. Sometimes it's the best thing. You don't want to overmanage, especially Zoysia guys. Don't overmanage them. Let them recover and come back,
Correct. Don't over push it in your fertility program, anything of that. Yeah, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
So it's been amazing.
Supplemental lighting for your Zoysia grass at all?
Only on those corners that I hardly get any light at all. So I'm good with just 2 light rigs versus the huge numbers of bigger rigs that I used to have.
You used to have 24 light rigs, and now you're down to 2 with this change of grasses, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from these 3 big rigs, I'm reduced only to 2 LEDs.
Only 2 LEDs now.
Yeah. And the running cost is just a fraction.
Yeah. And that southeast corner never sees any direct sunlight, does it?
Yeah.
So it's, what are you, 14 or 24 kilometers north of the equator? Not very far, are you?
Yeah, not very far. Yeah.
So, but that's, the architects don't think about the field, do they? When they design the stadium, they think of spectator comfort and the aesthetics and the beauty of the stadium, but they never think of what it's going to do functionally to the grass.
Right.
Yeah. Some of the challenges.
I guess some of the American architects have improvised, right? And been able to use Bermuda grass in systems where stadiums house more events than they do, more non-sporting events than they do sporting events.
All stadiums are multi-event now, right? It's not just a sports stadium. Yeah, the Geller Dome in Arnhem, Holland was the first one to do this kind of concept of have a field that rolls in and rolls out, it being ryegrass there. But yeah, that's Tifway Bermuda grass right there at Arizona Cardinals.
And then I think they have Tifway as well.
Yeah, at Allegiant Stadium. Yeah, in Las Vegas. So that last year was their inaugural season with no fans. I'm sure it'll be packed though, won't it?
This looks ideal, but unfortunately Singapore don't have much land. So we can't roll it out. We need parking space and all that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do you guys think that the system that Jonathan has in place, where he's rolling the fields out, putting them off site, and then bringing them back in, is that something that we could potentially see in NFL stadiums or soccer stadiums in the States?
It'd be interesting. You could do, well, you know, you could, in my opinion, you could feasibly easily do something like that. You know, everything costs money, but you could do it in Dallas or Houston and maybe Atlanta. But, you know, I don't know about Detroit and Minnesota. Because what do you do? Where do you roll it out to in January and in December when there's 2 feet of snow outside? You know, so those become some of the challenges of do it. You roll them out and put them in a big greenhouse somewhere, or do you know, that becomes a challenge. You know, the nice thing about Singapore is their weather's the same. Almost all the temperatures don't fluctuate year round.
That's right.
So every climate has its own microclimate and its unique environment. So, but for all the warm season climates, I think you could probably do that feasibly. You know, you could do some sort of lay and play.
I mean, my lay and play operation is not really a long process. It's actually about 48 hours. I can get the whole stadium converted. Yeah, it's just that I break it out in 12 hours, so it takes about 4 days.
Jonathan, how far do you have to travel once you take that out to where you're putting it? How far do you have to take the grass away to bring the other in? Is it pretty good distance, or is it not too far from the stadium?
The furthest nursery would be about an hour, 40 minutes.
Okay.
And because I have 3 nurseries, 2 of them are really close by. One of them is just a 50 minutes drive, and the other one is about half an hour drive.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, and go ahead.
So the location plays in my favor because some parts get more rain and some parts don't get so much rain, so I can pick and choose.
Okay.
You know, so Energy Stadium in Houston, they used to have the tray system, modular tray system, and that was grown in the parking lot outside the stadium. So they would bring it in and out, you know, and it got really old and the corners were damaged and they started having issues. So they just went artificial. But they could adopt a lay and play system like this, and, you know, feasibly, depending on the you know, the schedules of the stadium, if they're not having concerts and things, and if they use maybe stadium zoysiagrass, they wouldn't have to take it in and out for every game. They could maybe keep it in for several months at a time or a couple months at a time. And if they had supplemental lighting, if they had grow lights, then they could keep it in even longer. So, you know, I think it's doable, but it just costs money, right? Everything costs money, and that's where it's going to go.
It's interesting you brought this thing up. The initial design for Sports Hub is actually a palletized tray system. Yeah. But we did know that the trays and all that would be very hard to maintain. And we think that over the years, the wear and tear of all the constant moving back and forth. And another thing is storage within the same actual site is a big problem. So hence we went down the path of a lay and play without the trees.
So Tyler, is stadium available yet, or is it coming? Like, could someone go out and buy some stadium sod, or is that coming soon, or do you know, what do you know about that?
Yeah, it's coming soon, and I believe that someone is going to be installing it. I believe this fall. I believe it's a golf course fairway, but looking at their production field, it's not completely ready for sod at this point. They've just planted a lot of stadium down at Blade Runner, and it should be ready next year, the year after. I had a question for Kyley and Taylor. If we've talked about a lot of high-end sports fields, from a low-end sports field standpoint, say you had a Parks and Recreation superintendent come up to you, or a high school athletic director come up to you and ask you what Bermuda grass to put in, or what grass in general to put in for their field, how would you help them walk through that?
So if it was a local high school or a Parks and Rec field, it would kind of what's the budget? If we're going like we don't have a whole lot of money, 419 is going to be the most affordable grass you can get. and that would be it's a good, has good traffic tolerance, and it's kind of the staple. It's been around for a long time. The other grasses are really good. If you could afford them, that would be great. But usually they have a higher cost right now because they're still so new, and they've not been around near as long as Tifway as far as putting that in. But I was thinking about a zoysia. I guess Doc, what's the most commonly available zoysia you could probably get for a sports field here? Xeon?
Probably
Or
Xeon would be the most common right now, or of the Matrella for sure. There's some Japonicas that I'd question using though as much in the sports field right now without over a Bermuda grass. I would definitely go with a Bermuda grass. But you again look at your inputs. You're probably going to mow them a little higher too, like an inch and a quarter, even for like a low budget complex, so they could get away with maybe mowing 2 times a week instead, or once a week potentially. But it's all about budget, right?
yeah, so if you're on a budget, probably like looking at like, do you have shade issues? Do you not? That's one. Do you have the ability to water it? Do you not? So kind of like how much maintenance are you going to be able to do? Are you going to be able to mow it? If you can't mow it, Bermuda grass can kind of get out of control on you if you don't mow it very often. I've seen Bermuda grass get really crazy. So it really kind of depends on what's the amount of maintenance that can be done, because the more maintenance you can do generally with Bermuda grass, a lot of times the better it can get to a certain point, then it levels off. But you got to have to put some more inputs than you would a zoysia sometimes, and some of the other. But in Tennessee, you'd have like your other choices are going to be a tall fescue or like Kentucky bluegrass, which they're going to die off in the summertime. Some of those here when the heat gets really hot. So those are kind of things to consider. So there's not a stock says we grow all things equally poor in Tennessee, so it's kind of hard to make that choice to kind of depend on where you're at. But Bermuda grass has been the most traffic tolerant one. If you don't have shade issues and you're kind of on a budget, that seems to usually been for me. Taylor, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can agree with you there, Kylie. For sure, I think Bermuda grass is probably the way to go when you're thinking like Parks and Rec or like a high school field or community park, something that's going to have a higher rate of recovery. Because I mean, you've got several practices and multi-sport or in multi-use fields out there, so you want something that can recover very quickly. Thinking about that, that made me think of another question to ask Tyler. So you've got 24 games of simulated traffic out now on your 419 and your Stadium and Xeon and your other variety of Zoysia. What do you think is going to happen once you get to 40 games? Do you think they're going to decrease at the same rate, or do you think the Stadium is going to fall off compared to the Bermuda grass? What do you think the comparison is going to be there once you continue the study on to, we'll say, 40 games?
Probably around 40 games, we'll start seeing drop. I would think we'd see drop off on everything, because that's a lot of traffic. But maybe since we're trafficking Monday through Thursday, we may be able to get some recovery over the weekend. And so whatever grass initiates some recovery, that may be the grass that drops off the slowest at that point.
Right.
I really don't know. I'm really curious to see what happens.
On you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cold tolerance will be another thing we look at too for these Bermuda grasses. Sometimes in at least eastern Tennessee and in northern parts of the state, we could get some areas that get winter kill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for at least the winter kill aspects of the three we have with Tahoma and Northbridge,
Tip tough.
with Tiff Tough, we're kind of at that point where, at least in the studies we've done with the NTEP and the other trial, we've not had any winter kill on those varieties. We've had some and some different ones, but we don't get extreme cold like temperatures here as some other parts do. But at least with the plots that we've had, I've not experienced any winter kill on those plots specifically. Retaining those grasses we have a silt loam root zone. That's kind of the native one here. And we've not seen anything there. And we've not seen anything on the sand. But at this point, it's kind of, I'm sure the further north you go, the colder it gets, you might see more. I don't know, Doc, have you seen a whole lot? I mean, we've not seen it here, but have you heard a lot about those? I mean, like Northbridge has got quite a bit more cold tolerance. I don't know how Tahoma and Tiftuff have. I'm not.
Tahoma's also
here.
got exceptional cold tolerance. I think out of Kansas, some of the work at the NTEPs out of Kansas, so it was even it had the best cold tolerance, the Tahoma. you know, it's kind of that it's another Oklahoma State variety. And Dr. Wu has done a phenomenal job breeding, you know, Latitude, Northbridge, and Tahoma as these new cold tolerant varieties that have excellent wear tolerance. The Tiff Tough, it has, you know, it has almost double the root mass when you go down deeper, like about, you know, halfway, like deep into a profile, 15 to 30 centimeters, or, you know, 6 to 12 inches down. It's almost got double the root mass of the other Bermuda grasses. And it has a lot, it's been touted for its drought tolerance. Well, it's more drought avoidant because it can harvest, it's got more roots to harvest water from a greater profile. But I think a lot of that below ground, I don't know if that helps it with its cold tolerance too. I haven't seen it in really some cold tolerant trials, but I would suspect it's fair to decent or pretty good for a Bermuda grass. But definitely, you know, Tahoma and Northbridge and Latitude are excellent cold tolerant grasses.
And that's not to say that they won't get winter kill. We saw in Oklahoma and Texas, these Bermuda grasses experience winter kill, but those are extreme weather conditions they had.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's not something we see every year moving forward.
Unless you're a sod farmer and you want to sell grass, right? A sod salesman. But yeah, I think, you know, it's going to be really interesting 5-10 years from now when we look at these low, like where are we in the sports turf industry with budgets? You know, they're not cheap, but those robotic painters that have come out have really done a great job, and they do a great job marking fields, keeping them, and, you know, over time they pay for themselves because of labor savings. The robotic mowers is the big thing I think we're going to start seeing on sports fields that is, you know, pun intended, might be a game changer. You know, that's going to be able to, because just finding someone in labor, which is the greatest input. And if you have to mow, because we know that mowing 2 times or 3 times a week is better than 1 for getting more tillering, more leaf growth, and improved wear tolerance on grasses. Cool season and warm season grasses, the more frequently you mow. And if you have these robotic mowers, you eliminate the labor part of it, but you can mow your grasses more frequently and better to get a higher quality sports turf that is going to wear better. That's going to be 1, safer for the kids and adults that are playing on them, and 2, giving us higher quality fields and within constrained budgets for sure. I think that's what we're going to see going forward with changing environments of the sports turf industry.
And one of the when we teach undergraduate students about turfgrass, one of the first things we talk about is species and cultivar selection. And we've shown that improved Bermuda grasses really are good for traffic tolerance. They have improved winter injury or reduced winter injury. And then you have these Zoysia grasses that are kind of coming almost out of nowhere and having traffic tolerance that's comparable to Bermuda grass. And we had cultivars 10 years ago that most of us wouldn't even, we'd kind of laugh if we heard that we had these traffic tolerant Zoysia grasses in the States. And so that's how far we've come, and there's no telling what we see, you know, in the next 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, so like one of the big take homes from this is that if you start with a good grass, a good variety, no matter what, like whatever you're looking at, you're going to be much better off. It's going to be less inputs on down the road because you may have less winter kill, less fertility, whatever you're looking at, better shade tolerance. You're going to be better off if you have the best variety you can get at that point. If you can invest in that, it's really, from the research we've done, it's been very beneficial for you. It might really pay off dividends down the road for what you can get. But again, you're always restricted due to whatever the budget constraint. But if you're not, and you can afford some of these grasses, the best grass you can start with really set you up for success as you go down the road.
Totally agree. I paid a very expensive lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. You inherited also, though, right? You came into it, and you made some significant changes for that, for sure, for the betterment, for sure.
So we have reached the end of the hour. You guys, can you see this GCSAA item on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
This is the GCSAA approval code. So if you want to get education credits for GCSAA, type in this code. I'll leave it up for a couple minutes. And I believe we have a question here. I've noticed in Neyland Stadium, the end zone stays the same color all season, very thick as well. Is that from overseeding or lack of traffic in the end zone?
Because they switch ends every quarter. That doesn't mean no one's scoring. So there's going to be a lot more wear in the end zones on the defenders this year, though, I'm suspecting.
Yeah, whatever Tennessee's not, whatever end zone Tennessee's going into traffic.
That's funny.
That is funny. I have a chat question. So I'll stay on for a couple minutes. If anyone else has any questions, if not, thank you everyone for joining us. Our next Turf Tuesday, I believe, is August 3rd, the first Tuesday in August. We're going to discuss zoysiagrass putting greens. So be sure to register for that one. And we will see you next time.